And so I won't take much of his time other than to say this is Jay Brothers, and he's a former neighbor of mine, and so is some of his family in the area. Um, Anyway, he has developed this site, and I think he's going to tell you some very interesting stories about it. Um, Speaking of stories, I read the other day in the scene that Opryland had been started in way back in '79 and then closed 25 years later. And I started.
72 is when Opryland opened.
Oh, 72, I'm sorry. Anyway, 25 years. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice to get a collection of memories? How many of you do remember Opryland?
Oh, yeah.
Took your kids, took yourself? I know I did. I sat out and waited for them to have a good time if it were real hot. But anyway, I thought it would be nice if you just wrote a paragraph or two about what you remember, and then I'll take all of them to the archives, put your name on them, and I'll take all of them to the archives, and they'll have a collection of memories like that. So if you think of it between now and next week, please do that.
Jim, how many people work there?
Hmm?
Is anybody in the room that worked there? I don't. I was there the first day.
Really? Some of you work there too? Huh? Oh, I couldn't believe they took out of existence a money maker like that, because I remember spending a lot of money there with 3 kids. So
The thought was that Opryland was seasonal.
that's
If
true.
you put in a shopping center there, that would make money 365 days a year.
How many of you go shopping out there? I don't even go there. None of us do, right? Yeah, but they've got that big tourist crowd from the Opryland Hotel there. Anyway, I do have a comment I'm going to make, because I think Jay is going to use every minute of his time. Delilah Cohn will be here next week. She's going to speak about her father, who was a Holocaust survivor, and how he made his living through art. And then I was asked to ask all of you kind people to please turn off your cell phones. And if I forget any week, please remind me. Not that I forget to turn it off, but forget to say, please turn off your cell phone. And with that, let me turn Jay back.
All right. Well, thank y'all for coming. Thank y'all for coming out today. As I said, want this to be both about the focus on historic homes to an extent, but also about general Nashville history as I have seen it. So with that. We shall start off. As I said, for those of y'all coming in, I'd put up just a short list of some of the companies and just organizations that I will hit on, whether big or small, in this talk. And good to have the reminder there. And we appreciate it. So as we go through, you'll hit on some of these, and you can hopefully it will trigger some good memories or just knowledge of them and knowledge of the past of Nashville, as I have seen it, especially sort of on this west side of it. So I'll start off. One thank you to Jean. My mother, Ann Brothers, is sitting here second row beside the Reeves, and so she was kind enough to come over here. And then as I surprised Jean a little bit and thanked her a few months, I guess it was a few weeks ago, when Bob Buchanan did his talk on his family history, it inspired me to twist up my presentation today from just going over historic homes, which I can do in the future, off the blog and stuff, to doing more familiar stuff and my family history, which I found really coincides a lot with Nashville in the mid-state. So with that, I will start off. I have researched many historic homes in Middle Tennessee and West Tennessee and published blogs on my site, historythroughhomes.com. Today I will combine two favorite topics, local history and historic homes. Several of the homes will be noted during this family presentation: Hillcrest, Wilran, and Yalewood in Nashville, and Herndon, Cunningham, and Minglewood in Clarksville. Two sides of my family grew up in Middle Tennessee and ended up in Nashville: the Mac P. brothers and the John T. Cunningham Jr. families. I am the proud descendant of both, from judge to judge with Judge Cunningham and Judge Brothers, and grocery to grocery between Daddy Boy, MB Brothers, and me now. I am with Publix Belmead. The early career. And so that's right. Early career. Mac P. Brothers Sr., 1886 to 1958, was born near Christiana in Fosterville, Tennessee, which is near Murfreesboro. As a young man, he entered the dry goods business with a small general store and later the wholesale and retail grocery business. He prospered greatly and bought an interest in local banks. He was a, quote, up-and-coming man in the industry and was selected to become president of the Merchants Wholesale Grocery Company, a large co-op of food manufacturers, which was based in Nashville along Front Street, which is First Avenue, and Market Street, which is Second, in warehouse buildings. Daily, brothers took the train from Murfreesboro to Nashville and Union Station. He then walked down Broadway or took a streetcar to the warehouses and headquarters on Front and Market Street. In this way, he became familiar with the rail traffic and Union Station. Much product was coming from steamboat and barge river traffic, the Cumberland, Tennessee, and Mississippi rivers, which was important. The fact that grocery and food business was a major occupation in Montgomery, Davidson, Shelby counties indicates the growth of Tennessee and of the West, as well as the importance of the river system in our area, east and west with Cumberland, Tennessee, and other rivers, and north-south with the big muddy Mississippi River. River to rails. Started the MP Brothers Company. Within a few years, Brothers felt the urge of being his own boss and departed the co-op. He bought a struggling grocery company in 1909 and turned it around. And a few years later, renamed it MP Brothers Company, a wholesale and retail grocery firm. The company had a warehouse on 2nd Avenue North, because obviously at that point, that's where a lot of the river traffic was coming from. Later, something changed, the railroads. Later, Brothers relocated the operation south to the relatively new, monstrous Cummins Station with one bay. The company prospered well, so well that MP Brothers Company expanded to 3 bays, bay number 1, 2, and 3. Cummins Station was the largest concrete building in the world at the time. And concrete meaning it was fireproof to protect what? Food, any of the foodstuffs, anything that a company wanted to protect it. And also, what would concrete protect you against as far as pests go? Rats and mice getting in foodstuff. At least it reduced it very greatly. So MP Brothers Company grew to about 50 stores or more during that time. By this time, rail traffic had exploded. His staff took food freight from trains at the Union Station Depot and eventually loaded them onto truck transports to clients. The company's motto was, a little more courtesy. MP seemed to be a competitor in different markets with Horace G. Hill and his H.G. Hill Company that was in Middle Tennessee. Also notice I get to use the clicker here, the CT, if you can see it, the CT Cheek and Sons sign on Cummins Station. So they had it there before they were renamed to what, or had the famous product of what? Maxwell House Coffee. Very good. So it's interesting to see all these different grocery and food firms coming in and being in vicinity of one another. Brothers sold all the former branch houses except Clarksville and Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and Nashville. He moved the MP Brothers Company headquarters to Clarksville and lived there, where his son would meet his future wife. All right. Yeah, that's pretty. And I found in this Decatur Times on newspaper.com, it showed Daddy Boy MP Brothers with Pop MP Senior, and then with Russell. And although the images aren't great, it is quite fun and frightening how similar the different generations look with Russell and with my cousins and with Pop and with my Uncle Mac and stuff, just how the similarities were to relatives. All right. The MP Brothers Company expanded operations and offices across the Southeast, including Clarksville, Tennessee, and Decatur, Alabama. MP Brothers Company also won a huge meat contract for the U.S. military in World War I, which helped assure its prosperity. Brothers Markets and Fuller Markets, which they also bought, were a focus of the retail arm. When Brothers started, the grocery store was still counter-focused. Customers told managers their desires, and staff retrieved them from the shelves and brought them up front for service and to reduce shoplifting. Clarence Saunders in Memphis had started what? Piggly Wiggly, and the current self-service concept. Customers got items from the shelves themselves and brought them up to pay up front. And I think, and in reading some history on it, Saunders had concluded that the service, the serviceability of customers to get what they wanted to come up would outweigh shoplifting or theft, which obviously seemed to have been a correct concept since that's what's worked since then. Brothers followed this, quote, modern trend and also bought a number of former stores from Piggly Wiggly. When I first met the wonderful Rick Warwick, the Williamson County historian, he asked if I was associated with the Brothers Market and Fuller Markets, which had operated in Franklin in the last century, I guess up through maybe the 60s and 70s. I was pleased to know about it and say yes. Mac and the boys. Mac Sr. married Maddie White Thomas, 1890 to 1987, also from Fosterville, Tennessee. And they had two sons, my grandfather, Mac P. Brothers Pop, 1911 to 1984, and Russell White Brothers, Granddaddy Russell, 1909 to 2002. Both went into the family business. Mac spent much of his time in operations, while Russell spent much of his time overseeing meat purchasing and butcher operations, both in the large Decatur, Alabama office. In 1935, MP Sr. sold the Clarksville and Hopkinsville branches to Ragland Potter Company and moved to Nashville. Now we'll have some smiles. Velvet ice cream. Later, Mac Sr. and Russell bought Rock City Ice Cream Company around 1948 and sold ice cream under the Velvet Ice Cream brand. Also became owners of the Anthony Milk Company, and there were a lot of dairy companies around Nashville, I guess, through the early part of the last century. as well as founding Fidelity Assurance Company, which later became Russell Brothers Insurance Company. The insurance company was housed in an old house in Ackland Park until the 1980s. As we had looked at just before the presentation started, Ackland Park had been developed by Colonel Joe Ackland after the Centennial Exposition to continue the westward residential expansion down the West End. He was the son of Adelicia Franklin Ackland Cheatham of Belmont, and his Ackland Hall remained off West End until about 1960. At some point, Mac Jr. worked in the Clarksville area and met Judge Cunningham's daughter, Sarah White Cunningham. They married and thus joined the families together. And it has been interesting, and I've been careful in my research, pursuant to a conversation I had a long time ago with our old friend and family friend Ridley Wills, who's a great local historian. It has been interesting to see the jump from downtown to Madison, or actually I said the Inglewood and the East Nashville area, and all of a sudden in the last part of the century, from the 1890s to the 1920s, there's a jump from East Nashville to further out West End. And I was remarking on Ridley one time about that, and he goes, "Jay, be careful not to make too much of a big deal, because there are certainly some East Nashville folks who are like, we were here first." But it was interesting to see the sort of the prosperity and affluent neighborhoods move westward has been the trend. And between learning about Vanderbilt University and it getting placed here instead of East Nashville, the Centennial Park being developed instead of having residential neighborhoods there after the exposition, and then the westward trend, it's been interesting to see how West Nashville developed. And obviously, it has been also been great to know that obviously East Nashville, Donaldson, and all of those areas have developed as well. So, for the MP Brothers Company, I was trying to find a covered wagon, go westward, young man, and that on the end of it has a flat screen TV. So that was the sort of the funniest modern one. Eventually, the brothers followed the migration of families to the west side of Nashville in the expanding Belmead neighborhood in 1935. Mac Sr. and Maddie had a home on Jackson Boulevard. Mac Jr. and Sarah White resided on Deer Park Circle. And Russell and his wife, Mary Kate Troop of Alabama, lived nearby on Deer Park Circle, all within walking distance of each other. And from what I can gather, and it's also been interesting researching through life, this was back in the day when, if you're prosperous enough, you were building houses for your children as wedding gifts. And so I think in large part because of the general prosperity of MP Brothers, and I think because the meat contract for World War I for the U.S. military, he could afford to keep the family within walking distance of each other in a new neighborhood. So after Mac Sr. Passed away, let's see here. Let's go on the next one. Yeah. Maddie or Granny moved to Windsor Towers off Harding Road. Will ran one of the Wilson family homes. Will Moore was up at the end of Wilson Avenue on Harding, where Westminster Church is now. Will ran was one of the Wilson family homes that had been on the Windsor Tower site until about 1966. The Wilson heir died of a, quote, sword accident at his home. Afterwards, his widow returned, his widow returned to her hometown in Chattanooga and remarried. I've learned a little bit more that, and I'm not going to go too far in this because I know in Nashville you can have sides. But evidently, I've heard from close relatives that it was, quote, an accident, and that someone else actually did it who was there. But evidently, it was a huge hubbub that was kept quiet. But the newspaper report also noted that evidently the Randolph heir was not the nicest dad and ran the son pretty hard, and so that contributed to some of the accident. But anyway, so after that, I think the Wilson family sort of scrubbed its hands of the home. It was raised in the Windsor Towers. The new modern place was put up there. The stone wall and the gates are original to to the Wilson home, and the fountain may be as well. Not for sure on that, but anyway, that was an interesting tie-in. After Mac Sr. died, MP Brothers Company was divided between the two brothers. Mac Jr. continued the food business until the late 1960s. He had moved the offices and warehouses to near Franklin Pike and Berry Road, near the end of the Melrose area. The warehouse was right beside the main rail line just north of Radnor Rail Yards. When Interstate 65 was planned, he sold his property for a good price and pursued other ventures. He started Big Brothers Aircraft, Big Brothers Enterprises, based at the Nashville Airport about 1958, which acted as an agent for Aero Commander and offered airplanes for sale as well as fueling services to airplanes and charter flights and other ventures. And with a interesting foreign affairs connection was discovered when I was researching this. Evidently, the country of Israel purchased Aero Commander and had decided to have one Aero Commander franchise in the South. When the Israeli reps came to New York to decide on the franchises, Pop went up to bid, but didn't think he had much of a chance. Each company rep was ushered into a room, stated their name, and the Israelis opened a huge ledger to see if their name was on it. The ledger held the names of Americans who had contributed to the Israeli cause at their independence and the creation of Israel and their rough times afterwards. Thus, they rewarded their supporters. If your name was in the ledger, you got it. Pop got a contract. If your name was not on it, you were summarily dismissed. Otherwise, you got walked into a room and contract terms. Russell was popular around town with his ownership of Velvet Ice Cream. He also oversaw his real estate investments around the Southeast. Later, about 1964, Russell became one of the 5 original founders of Baptist Hospital on 21st and Church Street. The investors took over the existing Mid-State Baptist Hospital. Evidently, Jack Massey and his Massey Surgical Company were involved with both Mid-State and Baptist Hospital, and as we will see in a little bit, HCA Ventures. So that was an interesting tie-in that I'd been unaware of. The other side of the family now, Judge Cunningham and his family. Meanwhile, up north in Montgomery County, my great-grandfather, Judge John Talley Cunningham, 1877 to 1945, lived his adult life in Montgomery County. He planned to attend Vanderbilt Medical School, but according to a story from my mother, he couldn't stand the first class with the cadaver. He immediately switched to Vandy Law and prospered from there. But we will have more doctors in the future. He married Sarah White, 1877 to 1966, and became a lawyer and a farmer. They lived on his large 600-acre family home, Minglewood, which his parents had bought in 1889. Judge Cunningham raised the famous and valuable dark-fired tobacco, for which Clarksville in northern Tennessee is very famous, and helped found and became head of the Eastern Dark-Fired Tobacco Growers Association. The farmers moved their tobacco and other products on the Red River and Cumberland River across the southeast to New Orleans and to the world. He also grew about 20 acres of strawberries and other berries, which he shipped by train to a fruit wholesaler in Louisville, Kentucky. Judge Cunningham was elected to the Tennessee House of Representatives and was selected Speaker in just his second term at age 30, the youngest Tennessee Speaker on record. He and Sarah moved into Minglewood and enlarged it. After congressional service, he became a judge for Montgomery County from 1918 to 1945. My Uncle Tommy, who was a judge, wanted me to ensure that I noted that Judge Cunningham was the only judge brave enough to issue a warrant and have Luke Lee arrested on criminal financial charges out of North Carolina. He was eventually able to make bail and get out of that, but Tommy's very proud that we had a relative who would issue a warrant on Luke Lee. Because of his long, illustrious service, when the state of Tennessee built a bridge over the Cumberland River to connect Clarksville and the South Bank in 1925, the bridge was named in his honor, John Cunningham Memorial Bridge. And let's see, and the Cumberland River's there, and the John Memorial Bridge there, and then that's the site there. It was one of the first bridges constructed in 1915 by the newly formed Tennessee Highway Department, and the first major federal aid project in Tennessee. He was also honored by the John T. Cunningham Community Room in the Montgomery County Courthouse later. His brother Frank wed Eileen Wiggins in 1914, and they lived in the Herndon Cunningham home in Clarksville. John and Maddie had two daughters, Sarah White Cunningham, 1930 to 1980, who wed Mac Brothers Jr., Pop. And connected our families. Harriet Chloe Cunningham Northington shared a May birthday with me, and according to my mother, wanted to celebrate with me when I was born, but alas, she died before we could do so. Aunt Chloe was a noted artist, and with her second husband, Watkins Northington Jr., were generous supporters of Austin Peay State University with scholarships. Her son by her first marriage held the deed to Minglewood, but resided out of state. While the family slowly sold off parcels of the farm, Minglewood did slowly deteriorate with no one there, and vagrants damaged the house as well as a fire occurred. Commercialization crept up in the area, and about a decade ago, the last pieces were sold and the house was demolished. My cousin had gotten me some pictures of when he had visited, I'm assuming in the last 5 or 6 years, and inside of the house was pretty trashed. And again, as I'll go off subject just a little bit. When we're talking about preservation of homes, it fundamentally requires two things: an interest in keeping it, and capital or money. Someone has to be interested in keeping up a home and have the money to do it. And in so many of these homes, later generations did not have both of those. And so that's part of a preservation debate, is how do you keep those two things going? Now, back on topic. Let's see here. All right, Granddaddy. Russell and Mary Kate and the kids. Russell moved from Deer Park to Iroquois Avenue, then to a turn-of-the-century home on Woodlawn Drive. It was likely built around the same time that the Nashville Golf and Country Club, hope you all have heard of that, was developed off the north side of the Whitland bowling lands. Thus, bowling, Avenue, and Golf Club Lane. Very good. Uncle Russell, his son wed Linda Boone of Alabama and continued the insurance business for years and was also a pilot. Running a coal company and a plane charter company, he continued owning Russell Brothers Insurance. He turned to the dark side with some drug transportation in the 80s and paid the price with a lengthy prison term, and that's as diplomatic as I will be. At my going slightly off topic, I was fortunate to get married post his incarceration and prison stuff. So my wife got to meet a bald, charismatic, fun relative. And he is very charismatic and talked about it, and has some very good friends who also said when they see him and are out with him, they also may stay arm's length in case someone wants to take a shot at him, because not everybody, had the same feelings. That was interesting to hear. So Uncle Don T. Brothers married Peggy Sue Waller, and after being widowed, married Kay Baldridge. He had a long, prosperous career in commercial real estate and overseeing family real estate interests. Mary Corinne married Dr. John Frist, creating a connection to the Frist clan. Cousin Tim Brothers has continued in real estate as well as an appraiser, and Dr. John Brothers has followed in the medical footsteps of my father and is a well-known pediatric allergist with Hermitage Associates, and has certainly helped my daughter, who has many allergies, keep them under control. After Mary Kate died, Granddaddy married Connie White King and moved into her spacious historic home, Yeawood, on Chickering Road. Connie was the widow of James King, who, along with John Dale, helped make Martha White Foods, including Martha White Flour, a huge success.
Was Connie's father and uncle.
Okay, Connie's father and uncle. Okay, because there's a King and a King Jr. So yes, the marketing with Martha White Foods involved a heck of a lot of country music connections and sponsorships, and that is a whole nother story. All right. Pop and the kids, and Sarah White and the kids. Mac Jr. and Sarah White purchased E.B. Stallman's home, Hillcrest, on Linwood Boulevard. And E.B. Stallman had owned the what paper? The Banner. And also put up the Stallman Building, one of the first skyscrapers at the top of First Avenue. Later, the brothers added a pool house with an office for Pop, which I enjoyed growing up, the pool, and the pool house, all the above. It was nice. Uncle Mac stayed with MP Brothers Company. He married Ann Huddleston Brothers, so we had the two Ann brothers in town, which has always been, I'm sure, a humorous coincidence. Ann with an E, my mother, and Ann without an E, Ann Huddleston. He sadly developed multiple sclerosis and retired from work. Dr. John C. Brothers married my mother and brothers. He did go directly to Vandy and made it through Vandy Medical School and became a renowned doctor, an orthopedic surgeon. His practices were Nashville Orthopedic Clinic and later Premier Orthopedics and Sports Medicine. He and his partners were affiliated with the growing Hospital Corporation of America, HCA. He and other investors, as well as HCA, bought the local West Side nursing home and repurposed it into West Side Hospital, which I remember very well growing up, where Dad served as chief of staff for years. HCA has since turned it into Centennial Women's Hospital. He also served his alma mater, Montgomery Bell Academy, for nearly 20 years as the football team doctor and took care of numerous boys and comforted numerous parents. In fact, I was just at a NBA luncheon and met a couple of the folks in the from the 80s classes, and one of whom waggled his thumb and said, "Your dad put this back together for me." I said, "I'm glad he did." Dad served a couple years in the Navy near the end of near the end of the Vietnam War. Sorry about that, and was stationed in Boston. Upon his return, he brought down the pioneering techniques of arthroscopy, so you didn't have to go be so invasive. Mom was very involved with philanthropic matters, and later in life, she's bloomed wonderfully into a renowned watercolorist. A little believe it or not story. My mother's father, Nick Carter, was headmaster of MBA. Dad graduated from MBA in the spring of 1957. Nick became headmaster in the fall of 1957. Nick died in the spring of 1979, and I, the oldest grandson, started MBA in the fall of '79. So the brothers men missing Mr. Carter by about a season. When I was going through some old notes, also Ross had another memory, remembering the Big Brothers aircraft. In the 1970s, I remember driving out to the old Nashville airport, which I'm sure plenty of y'all remember as well, parking our station wagon to go to Snowmass, Colorado for spring break at the old Big Brothers private field next to Berryfield, and being driven over to the Nashville airport terminal, and then had vice versa on the return. Thomas White, Uncle Tommy, brothers went to Vanderbilt Law School and became a lawyer, and has since been elected several times to the Sixth Circuit Court. He has used his influence and technology to update the computer system for the 21st century. He was married to Laura Bainbridge, a realtor, and after being widowed, has married Julia Westland, an interior designer. After Sarah White passed away, Pop divested many of his businesses and ventured into cattle farming with farms in Dixon and Hickman counties. As Middle Tennessee has grown, the Cunningham and Brothers families did so as well. MP Brothers grew with Nashville from merchant wholesale offices at the warehouses on Cumberland River to the MP Brothers Company at Cummins Station and then Melrose area for the dominant rail traffic. Mac Brothers Sr. followed the growing growth trends in technology. From customer counters to the aisles we strove daily, grocery stores have changed. Moving from rural to urban areas, the Brothers family has moved from Murfreesboro to Nashville, then on west to Belmead, and then up in the general environs. From Granddaddy Russell with Baptist Hospital and my father, Dr. John Brothers, with his orthopedic practice in West Side and affiliation with HCA in the Frisk, the family is connected to the massive growth of the healthcare industry. And of course, Judge Brothers, or Tommy, used his influence and technology to update Nashville and the mid-states court system and help make justice more efficient for all. And very quickly, a bunch of years ago when I was, especially when I was a bachelor and was out and about in social functions, I had met a fellow who was a lawyer who did appear in front of him somewhat regularly. And once he figured out who I was, he said, "Thank you. Tell your uncle thank you." I said, I appreciate that. Why? And he goes, "Your uncle has brought technology to the court system. He's brought CD-ROMs." And I was like, and? He goes, "If you're a lawyer and you're not very well prepared, you can start throwing out court cases, and the judge would usually have to adjourn, go back to his office and look them up. Your uncle goes down, clicks on the CD-ROM, brings up the court case, looks at the synopsis in a few minutes, and says yes or no. And if he says doesn't apply, next to the opposing counsel, who then has to figure out what else he's going to do. So he goes, he speeds things up a lot for justice. So I appreciated that. That was an interesting story. With that, with these different areas and looking at the different family history, it has been interesting to see the growth of Nashville and Clarksville from a different view, thus a family view, the topic. So in closing, Pop was a tall country boy who made and lost fortunes. He had been one of the best amateur golfers in the world in the 1960s and 70s. At the end of his life, he was starting a new special breed of cattle on his Fairview farm. He had helped many people in his long life, and I remember at his funeral, there were people who came up to ask to whom they should repay the money he had lent them. Hillcrest remains on the bend of Linwood Boulevard with its 6 acres intact. And evidently, both Mom and Dad and some other relatives have known some of the more recent owners. Granddaddy Russell was a respected businessman who's also involved very much in civic affairs. He was also a great practical joker. His home was sold and the land subdivided to become Hanover Square on Woodlawn Drive. Judge Cunningham left his positive mark on his beloved Clarksville and Montgomery County. During his time, a judge had many more community duties, so he was involved in the road building, bridge construction, and city development. Minglewood is gone, but it stood proudly for a couple generations as Clarksville grew, and there is a Minglewood Elementary School on part of the land. So I hope you have enjoyed this family journey through Nashville history. I've always loved history. After working in a few small businesses and teaching, I survived a stroke about a decade ago. Recovering, I joined Public Supermarkets, Belmead, to assess my skills and abilities, and have remained in the grocery business since. In addition, I started a website, History Through Homes, to publish research on our Nashville history, our historic homes, and their families, and help preserve our Tennessee and general history as Nashville does grow and change. Lists and blogs for Middle Tennessee and West Tennessee with Memphis are up, and East Tennessee will be soon, my little plug. My youngest daughter, Sarah, is going to UT Knoxville this fall and will be going to nursing, so the timing is wonderful to research the East Tennessee areas. Thank you, and I'd be glad to answer any questions. My mom, 20 minutes? Not bad. My mother told me not to take the full hour. Yes, Hannah. Yes.
First of all,
Please.
your website's great.
Thank you.
Talk about rabbit hole to go down. I wanted
Yeah.
to ask, early on in your presentation, you had that newspaper article, Brothers Edition.
Yes.
What paper was that?
That was the Decatur Times published it, and it was for one of their is for an anniversary. So it was a paid thing, when you're reading it, it is really interesting because I think it was done in the 40s, and it reads like it because there's some language in there that is definitely 1940s. From talking about men doing this and some wonderful women in the office, and sort of it's interesting, but it clarifies a lot of how widespread the grocery business was that Daddy Boy was focusing on northern Alabama and northern Tennessee, and I guess Horace Hill had Middle Tennessee. And I don't know how, I know that we had a lot of stores there, but don't know how many, and obviously, but it's also interesting to see, as we all well know, between Hill food stores diminishing or going out, and then Hill Realty being a national institution, to see how if you have the land underneath the store, that's as valuable. So yes. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to ask about when the Brothers Company moved from East Nashville to West Nashville. Was that not because of the fire, the terrible fire, 7
Well, and
homes were
yeah,
burned.
yes, I know that that was one of the two big events, which I'm sorry I missed, was the East Nashville fire at the turn of the last century, which devastated East Nashville and a huge number of homes, and probably did lead the families who could relocate to go west instead of rebuilding there. And then for me, the second one was, I guess, the tornado of the late '90s, when we had, as an aside, we had several friends who were over there who said that it just obviously devastated the tree canopy, and I'd never seen it. But later on, I was at a civic event talking to an ambulance driver whose beat it had been for 15 years, and he goes, "That was one of the few times in my life I was scared because I knew the place like the back of my hand. And once the tornado came through, I did not know where I was on some streets. It just messed stuff up so badly. But I was sorry that I did not see East Nashville in its full tree glory, because evidently that would have been amazing."
All the rich
Yeah.
people lived there, except
It-
for some of your family.
Yeah.
who
Well,
were elsewhere.
well, exactly. Well, you had let's pull this up real quick. You had let's pull up Renoir for the Warner, and let's pull this up here, because like you had the Warner family moving.
Was that Renoir?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Warner spelled backwards. Did I get it? And there we go. The original Warner house. There we go. With its flamingos and everything else. And that's where everything, I guess, it started with Percy's father, James Warner, Percy's father, and the James Warner and the other folks from Madison area married there, and then I think, and then after, and then I guess the James Warner's wife remained there for years and years, didn't want to move, and I guess within a few months after she died, Percy came in, and then the rest of them moved from there and started going westward, and to Elmington Park area, and then to Royal Oaks, where in Belmead, and then several other homes as well. Joe Warner bought what was called the White House, which is now St. Cecilia Academy, over there. And so it was interesting to see how these different families moved and where they moved to, and just that general movement. And I'm obviously there were plenty of families that stayed there, but there was a huge movement west. And again, in part because you had the little buffer of the Methodist Church South deciding to build a university after the Civil War. Who to donate $1 million? Cornelius Vanderbilt, because of the the Elston family had some ties with Cornelius. Evidently, he did not give money away very much, and they were able to pull Vanderbilt on this side of town, and between Vanderbilt being put there and then not developing the Centennial Exposition into residences, but keeping that as a park, it made this huge buffer. So the professional class started moving further west. First Ackland Park, and then further, and then obviously Percy and plenty of others finally purchasing the Bellamy Plantation, which was going downhill financially, resuscitated it, and then sold off. And so again, the whole rabbit hole thing. And I've been around here, attended enough of these meetings here to know that there are plenty of y'all who know way more in detail than I do. And so it's fun when questions are answered from up here. So that, from your question way back, I think that answers that. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
When you
Yeah.
showed the picture of the ice cream,
Yes.
and they all had stars on there, why?
I'm assuming it's some cowboy theme.
Oh, okay.
I'm assuming that because I've seen 2 different ads for Velvet ice cream, and they both had the same type thing. So I'm assuming they're. And in the 40s and 50s was when the cowboy theme renaissance was coming up with Hopalong, Cassidy, and some of y'all know him more than I do, but and those folks, Gunsmoke and others. I'm gonna stop there before I get embarrassed myself. But yes, and so that was fun. But and speaking of that, I have heard several times over the course of my life when folks have talked about Granddaddy Russell and they were talking about his civic different affairs and contributions. And they said, well, folks liked your granddad, but they liked his ice cream just as much. So, because when he would come, he would bring a truckload. So it's like, okay, there's a reason they enjoyed his visits. So yes, and so as you and as I hope you will do as you go through in our reading about Nashville history, and then please feel free to go up on my site on the first page of it. I certainly am blunt. I focus on the human element and the human story side. Other folks can focus on the architecture. Kim and others I'm sure have done the books and are can explain all the different architecture. And I've learned about Queen Anne style and other stuff. And on the blogs I'll give a brief description of that. But I focus on the families and try to do the chronology and the ownership, and then the stories, and then and being now in a family outnumbered with all females, both dogs, wife, and 2 daughters. I have also realized a long time ago that history is very patriarchal, and I have focused on trying to get as many female stories as I can going through, and there are plenty, as well as working on diversity, African American, and other ownership in other homes. So as you go through, you will find all those types of things. And then the last part I'll say is on at the end of it, a difference between my work on the site and Ridley Will's great work with his Nashville Pikes series and plenty of others is that I've been able to connect up homes between the ownership of the homes and who had the different homes and the relatives. And again, talk about a fun rabbit's hole when you begin figuring out who's who and where's what is where. That's a lot of fun. You begin, oh, now I see why somebody did something or knew someone. So that has been fun. Yes, sir. Hey there.
This is
Yeah.
so wonderful, and I'm so glad we have you here because, we lost Ridley Wills.
Yes.
It's a terrible loss because he, like you, was so interested in the way Nashville has evolved as a family center. You mentioned Francis Carter, the headmaster of NBA. What's your connection with him?
Oldest grandson, Nick Carter, that Papa.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I'm his oldest grandson. That's his daughter right there. And
Francis Carter, the
yeah.
headmaster?
Yeah. So he was 57 to 79. So I got to avoid being under him, which may have been good, but got to be taught by his wife, Carrie Carter, ancient medieval history. And so the history's been there. Totemoy is up here as well. Let's have just some real fun doing some chamber. And then Gene, I'll wrap this up for you, since I still got a few minutes to 1. But let's see here. And Totemoy.
What does that mean?
Totemoy is. Did anyone else know? Yeah, no, Totemoy is, what, yeah, let me get this cursor going here.
I know it's on the big stone
Yes.
gateways.
Totemoy was an Indian tribe in a location in I think Maryland, that the Garland here it is here. Garland Tinsley built the home, and he was a big industrialist. Thomas Garland Tinsley built the home, and it was like in the turn of the century. The Tinsleys were huge on the East Coast, very wealthy family, and had an estate over there. And when he moved here, he named his home for that Totemoy, which is also the name of the top honor civic society at MBA. And when I first had started doing presentations for this and for the History Through Homes, I did it at St. George's Church. And the Brandau Sewell, who was the coordinator of the Prime Timers, and had invited me. When I was going through, all of a sudden I hit a picture of the first class of the Totemoy folks. Guess who was one of the first in the class? Sewell. And so I got to surprise him and embarrass him a little bit by finding an old yearbook picture of these young guys lounging on one of the cannons on the front lawn at MBA with the first class of Totemoy, which is just the top honors that you can get, and is both for MBA, so that both students and faculty and contributors can be tapped for it. I hope it to an extent still is. The boys get thudded on the back, and then the teachers and older folks get lifted up. But that's where that came from. And so the original Totemoy was there. I think it burned in about a decade later, and the Ball building was built up with the remains. I don't think it burned all the way down. But that's been another fun part of this whole thing, and I try not to completely focus on the west side. Of course, that's where I'm driving every day. But just to give y'all a bearing, and for those of y'all who live on the west side, the latest thing I've realized is that you had, in 1940s or so, you've got the Wilmore at the top of Wilson Boulevard, where Westminster Church is, the Wilson family. And then coming down, you had Garland Tinsley's Totemoy. And then on the other side of the street, Joe Warner's White House, which evidently I finally found out he had some financial troubles, which is the reason he sold it to the Dominican Sisters, starting up St. Cecilia and Overbrook. And Overbrook is what the main house is called now. But you had Totemoy there. You had Julius Wheel's mansion next door to it, which I remember running across when I was a runner at MBA. And
You had the Coca-Cola franchise.
oh, yes, and Dudley and Peggy Richter were relatives. I guess Peggy's father's house and mother's house. Thank you. And we they were great friends of ours through Vanderbilt baseball. We had met them a couple of seasons ago, and they were great. And when I was researching Wheel's house, and all of a sudden I went reading through. I'm like, Peggy Wheel Richter. I went, aha! Figured it out, and when we saw, I said, I know where you lived, and she goes, oh, and said, yeah, that's fine. But it was interesting to see Totemoy, the Wheelhouse, the Wilson House, now Windsor, to realize behind Vine Street Christian is the Sloan House, Hemlocks. And it was there for a long time. I don't know when it was down. And then one of the things that I had fun with, and I still want to pursue with all the Bellamy Plaza redevelopment with AJ Capital, is that the George Schwartz's house, Treetops, was to the left of the Kroger store. I don't know, it must have been torn down. And,
Whose house was
George,
that? The Schwab house.
the Schwab House, who's affiliated with the liquor, yeah.
George
Uh,
Dickel.
With George Dickel, thank you. But I had, now that they have started redoing the plaza, I'm going to try to approach AJ Capital about having some sort of plaque there for the Treetops Mansion, just to, again, work to tie in Nashville history, since they made a big deal of it at the community meetings. And so hopefully, again, tie stuff in. All right, you ready, Gene? And so thank you all very much.